Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and today we are 15 days, 5 hours, 38 minutes and 58 seconds away from Path of Exile Legion being released and all of us jumping in to enjoy the Breach 2.0 League as it were. And today I wanted to discuss and go over a particular unique that has been teased for us by the good folks and the good community manager Bex and all the folks over at Grinding Gear Games. This is Akuna's Will, which I struggled to pronounce the other day while we were all excited and just rushing through all of the hype information. We've had a little bit of time now to settle on some of the information that we've got and process some of the various pieces of information that are out there about POE Legion League, and this particular unique I wanted to focus in on because I love summoners, I love zombies, I love skeletons, I love specters. It's one of the reasons why I was attracted to playing POE way back in the day when I first started playing it, and by back in the day I really only mean a few years ago. Seriously playing POE back during Essence League. Mostly played hardcore characters, and pretty much for about 2 years straight I just always had either an SRS character or a zombie character or a skeleton character or a specter character, and most leagues all of the above. I used to play a lot of witches. That was just my thing. It's what I did. It was one of the things that set PoE apart from other action RPGs for me. And Akuna's Will has been teased for us. It is a unique that requires level 31. It provides some dexterity, which is often needed in terms of summoner builds. You often are low on stats unless you're playing a Baron build where you're, stacking up strength. And oftentimes, cast speed is also very much quality of life, because as a summoner, a lot of the time you are using your cast speed to flame dash around or to use another movement skill like lightning warp, where cast speed can be very, very helpful, even on something like SRS, where you need cast speed in order to improve the quality of life. And back in the day, to get out max SRSs, you needed spell echo and a bunch of cast speed to try and maintain that max amount of SRSs, and it was great, and they'd fly all around the screen. Anyway, really, really fun. So two needed stats are provided in terms of dexterity and cast speed, two quality of life stats. It's also an evasion and energy shield based gloves, so that's kind of heming and hawing. It's nothing spectacular. You're going to get much better stats either if you're going evasion or energy shield off of a rare spot. But then it also gives your zombies 97% increased maximum life, which is nothing to sneeze at. There aren't that many ways to really boost your minion life. This is adding another tool to that toolkit if you really want to boost your zombies and make your zombies really tank machines. But then it also gives these two lines that are very specific, very unique, and so today we are going to take a look at how these two lines interact with present gems already in Path of Exile. So the first line that really is interesting is that Raise Zombie does not require a corpse. Now, one of the reasons why this is important is because when you're playing a zombie build, if you've never played a zombie build, which we have an entire video dedicated to playing summoners in PoE, that'll be linked at the end of this video. But if you've ever played a zombie build in PoE, then you'll know there are some times where the requirement to summon a zombie off of a corpse in a particular zone, maybe it's a boss fight, particularly in boss fights and boss areas where there aren't corpses already, if your zombies die, then it's incredibly difficult to have them regen or even summon them again unless you're using something like Desecrate, which creates corpses, right? So unless you use a skill that creates corpses in and of itself, oftentimes it can be very troublesome if your zombies actually die during an encounter, during a fight, during a map. It can be troublesome if there's no corpses around. And sometimes this is much more of an older problem because a lot more of the monsters that have been added to the game and updated to the game over the last 2 years specifically have had corpses added to them. But not every monster used to be a corpse upon death, and not every monster still is a corpse upon death. Oftentimes there are corpse explosion effects nowadays, going even beyond strong boxes that might have Detonate Dead, but sometimes there are just Detonate Dead monsters or monsters that use Detonate Dead as a spell, which removes corpses, so it makes it tough from a quality of life standpoint to resurrect and summon another zombie if needed. So this one line, hey, Raise Zombie does not require a corpse, is a really, really nice and interesting way of solving the equation that is, hey, where's a corpse? I need to raise a zombie. I'm in the middle of a fight and I'm running out of meat shields. So it's really nice to have that. That's really interesting, really nice to have. The next line is really the build enabler and the game changer, as it were, for zombie builds. So it reads as following: your raised zombies count as corpses. Now, as soon as I read this, and for those of you that watched the hype announcement video, like as soon as I read this, I was like, huh, this is interesting. A change and a buff and a time for zombies to get played again. And what I've done here is just compiled all of the gems that we presently have that have a corpse tag included on them. So we've got Infernal Blow, which Infernal Blow interacts with corpses in that it deals damage to that target and to other nearby enemies. Enemies with either debuff explode when they die, damaging other enemies. Damage from this explosion cannot be reflected, requires a sword, axe, mace, staff, or unarmed. Anyway, so enemies that are debuffed or hit, it's all based off of their corpses. So you can see this. Explosion deals base fire damage equal to 6% of the corpse's maximum life. So Infernal Blow will now be based off of, if you're using Akuna's Will, based off of the maximum life of your still living zombie, which means you don't have to sacrifice the zombie. You didn't have to have it die in order for it to have this corpse effect, which is really nice. And they count as corpses. So you can be running around essentially as a battle summoner now using Infernal Blow and be augmented by zombies that will actually add to your damage of Infernal Blow. That's really nice. Devouring Totem is another skill that it leeches 30 life to you for each corpse consumed. Now, this is interesting because this totem says it consumes nearby corpses. So I don't know if this means that Devouring Totem is simply going to drain life from the zombie. The way how I read it, I would think that that's what it would do. It would interact with and drain the life from a zombie straight up, or simply consume it. In other words, it's gone. It's just gone, because consume is its own thing. It's not dealing damage or sucking life from the zombie. It might just consume it and then the zombie goes away. It could. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work as of yet. If any of you have heard any confirmation of how exactly that's going to work, I'd love to hear that. Or if you've got theories, leave us a comment down below. So that's Devouring Totem. It interacts with corpses in that it's going to give you life and mana back for each corpse it consumes. Then you've got Dominating Blow, which this attacks an enemy with a melee strike, applying a debuff for a short duration. If a non-unique enemy dies while affected by the debuff, the enemy's corpse will be consumed. So again, this is more about an enemy's corpse being interacted with. So at this point in time, not anything that Akuna's Will is going to necessarily interact with. That being said, maybe there's some sort of way that we can kind of turn our zombies into enemies or tag or targetable. I'm not quite sure how that would work out yet. But Dominating Blow at the moment doesn't necessarily look like something that immediately would be put to use by Akuna's Will. Desecrate, of course, is the heart and soul up until now of a lot of summoner builds, where it creates 5 corpses. It does a bunch of damage. Well, not a bunch of damage. It does some damage. Sure, there are some meme builds out there that really scale up Desecrate's dot over time. But really the function of Desecrate is mostly to allow for players to either use offering skills, which require consumption of a bunch of corpses, or summoning of specters, summoning of zombies. And so Desecrate at this point in time, I think just based off of Akuna's Will, if you can get your hands on an Akuna's Will, there's no reason for you to actually use Desecrate in a gem slot. And the reason why this is important, and I did want to just mention this briefly, is that oftentimes summoners are starved for sockets. We're starved for gem space, and there's a lot of decisions that have to get made when you're playing a summoner about how exactly you're going to stack your skills, because summoners can use so many different skills, both to augment their own abilities as to augment their various summons abilities. And so Desecrate, at the moment, I think Akuna's Will actually makes Desecrate a thing of the past that you don't necessarily need, because you've got Akuna's Will where you're raised zombies count as corpses. So if you need to pop corpses for something, you can use your zombies for that. And oh, by the way, if you're worried that, oh, I've popped my zombies, and so therefore I don't have my zombies anymore, and I've popped their corpses, so I can't resurrect zombies, well, remember that first line on Akuna's Will: raise zombie does not require a corpse. So you can just raise them again. You can pop them, and you can raise them. I think Desecrate's probably a thing of the past. Unearth fires a projectile that will pierce through enemies to impact the ground at the targeted location, creating a bone archer corpse where it stands. This created corpse is level 80, and it's a maximum of 10 corpses allowed. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool to think about how there are additional corpses that can be created by Unearth, but the reality is probably this is the same thing and the same category. This is why I put it next to Desecrate. It's probably just another corpse generating mechanic that we won't necessarily have to use or feel like we have to use when we're playing zombies, because Ray Zombie doesn't require corpses and they themselves count as corpses. Volatile Dead. Volatile Dead is a fantastic skill. A lot of us that have played Poet's Pen Volatile Dead throughout various leagues, you can see the smile on my face because it's great. It's great. Like, it was so fun to play Poet's Pen Volatile Dead and just warp around Shaper's like encounter and just good luck hitting me, Shaper. You can't hit me. I'm just Poet's Pen teleporting around, body swap, Volatile Dead, jumping Unearth, you know, that whole combo. Those of you that have never seen that combo, it's an absolutely filthy combo. You just teleport all around. You know, it's directed flicker strike, as it were, where you're constantly just jumping around, teleporting to corpses. And all of those corpses are then being popped by Volatile Dead, which has a homing effect and does a bunch of damage. So Volatile Dead simply pops the corpses. It pops up to 3 corpses per cast that are there, and each explosion deals a base fire damage equal to 3% of the corpse's maximum life. Now, you might be wondering, hey, why is it that minion life is such a big deal? Well, it's not just such a big deal for it to be tanky, to keep your minion around a lot, but it's also a big deal for explosion effects like Volatile Dead. So the fact that Akuna's Will adds raise monsters have 97% increased maximum life is a huge deal, not just for the tankiness of the zombie, but potentially for other augmented skills to be playing off of the zombie's maximum HP and then exploding all around a boss. Imagine this just for a moment. Just think about this. Imagine if you could play a trap style or a mine style character, but you don't have to go through all of the trouble of actually being a trapper. There can be times where you can have your traps essentially be targetable and be tanky for you, and there can also be times where you could turn your traps, your zombies, into essentially exploding massive traps that deal tons and tons of damage. That's possible now because of Akuna's Will. Okay, other skills potentially. Detonate Dead. Detonate Dead. It has a massive explosion that is based off of corpse. And so if you've got a bunch of zombies hanging out, messing around, and you cast Detonate Dead on it, the explosion will deal base fire damage equal to 6% of the corpse's maximum life. So Detonate Dead does double the damage. It's not homing. It's not homing like Volatile Dead is, but it is wonderful in that it deals twice as much damage in terms of the percentage, right? The percentage of the maximum life of the corpse. And so if the only corpse that's around is our zombie, and that's what it's pulling from, that's a lot of damage. That's a lot of potential damage that's present. Now, there's a lot of talk inside the summoning community. I feel like the summoning community inside POE is like its own little niche. I feel like there's, the POE community at large, and then there's different segments of it, right? There's the people who only play melee, triangulated. I'm thinking of you and some other people inside the G3 community. Then there's other people who only play like spellcasters, right? And then there's some other people who only play totems. Beckett, I'm thinking of you. Then you've got like the summoner community, right? And the summoner community is an entity unto itself. It's a subsection of the POE community. But it's interesting the different ways in which people take advantage of the wording and the language and the mechanics of summons and how to use them. I think Detonate Dead as well as Volatile Dead are 2 ways to take advantage of stacking a bunch of maximum zombie life and then really doing a bunch of damage, essentially making your zombies living traps to just explode on a boss while they're maybe doing an animation. Should be interesting. Then you've got Cremation. So Cremation is this really, really cool boss killing skill that does a bunch of damage, but basically the way how it works is a targeted corpse explodes and it deals area damage and turns into a volcanic geyser, which will repeatedly unleash projectiles sequentially. Okay, so it basically creates this little mini volcano. It's actually a really cool effect. I really like it as a skill visually. It's just a shame that you can't jam it into more different sorts of builds. And Akuna's will is now opening up the way for us to now have this explosion effect, which explosion deals fire damage, base fire damage equal to 4% of the corpse's maximum life. Now, there's some differences here, right? Some quality of life in between these skills. So with Volatile Dead, you've got the advantage that the explosion will home and go and chase down enemies. With Detonate Dead, you've got the advantage that it's the highest end in terms of taking the most amount of damage, maximizing the most amount of damage based on the maximum amount of life that your zombie will have. Cremation is kind of this happy middle ground, but it's rooted. It's rooted in a single individual place. So whereas Detonate Dead happens in an instant, it's just a momentary explosion of 6%, Cremation actually sticks around, and it fires, and it lasts actually for a period of time. It has a maximum of 3 geysers at any particular time. Each geyser fires 3 additional projectiles. It is a projectile tag, so you can add things like GMP, LMP to it and mess around with the projectiles and start getting projectiles to bounce and stack all over one another, similarly to what people do with Molten Strike. So it's very, very interesting the things that you can do with Cremation. But up until now, it was primarily used as a boss skill, at least to my knowledge. Feel free to correct me down below in the comments down below. To my knowledge, it's been mostly used on those Poet's Pen builds as a boss killing technique for those Poet's Pen auto stacking Volatile Dead builds, where you'd swap off from Volatile Dead or Detonate Dead, and you'd throw in Cremation, and that would be kind of your boss killing skill while you're still body swapping around the area. Cremation, I think, has got a lot more potential now, again, because you've got zombies all over the place, so you can constantly be popping up more Cremations as needs be, as they wear off on their duration, and you've always got a source of corpses to pop for you. You don't actually have to kill anything, which means when a boss pops up, imagine now for a moment, a boss pops up, starts doing their animation, maybe their dialogue, whatever, and you've got Volatile Dead waiting for them, you've got Detonate Dead waiting for them, and then you've got Cremation. If they're still alive after that, you've got Cremation waiting for them for whenever they actually animate and are targetable. Izaro, as he's rising up out of his pit of ascendancy, boy, yeah. There's lots of different ways to now wait for him to come up, and lots of different ways for damage to go off as he comes up. Okay, some quality of life. There are 6 different blue gems that interact with corpses. Of course, there's Raise Zombie, which now Raise Zombie does not require corpses, which is great. So, of course, you're still going to want to level it up because all of your zombie stats are based off of your Raise Zombie spell. You need that. It's very essential for playing a Raise Zombie build. Then you've got Summon Skill, which of course also interacts with corpses. So if you want to play around with Akuna's Will and with summoning skeletons, you won't have to have corpses in the room. You don't have to rely on Desecrate, which means maybe instead of having Desecrate and trying to jam Desecrate or Unearth into a particular build because you need corpse generation, maybe you just jam in Raise Zombie and Summon Skeleton now on all of those various Summon Skeleton builds, because the zombies themselves are going to act as the corpses from which the skeleton is summoned. Then you've got Body Swap, which is really interesting because now for movement skills as a summoner, we can essentially have a scenario where you use Convocation to bring your zombies to you, and then you can reposition, and maybe your zombies are in a better spot, or maybe the boss is now aggroed towards you, and so you want to get back to where your zombies are, and then you could essentially body swap to your zombies. So yeah, so it's interesting, right? I'm not sure how that's going to work. Zombie UI is notoriously buggy. Everything relating to Summoner AI is notoriously buggy and tough to control. But it's interesting to think about how we could actually potentially use Body Swap as our primary or secondary movement ability to get around, and we're constantly staying close to our zombies. I almost think of it kind of as a leapfrog style of movement, where you would be convocating to bring the zombies to you, and then maybe you flame dash away, convocate, or maybe conversely, you flame dash away, and then you realize you want to get back, so you body swap because maybe you're out of flame dashes, so you want to get back to your zombies for whatever reason. There's lots of options that are now available to you there with Body Swap. Then we've also, of course, got the 3 offering skills. Bone Offering, which of course requires corpses for you to have minions, for your minions to have block chance on attack and spell. Then of course you've got Spirit Offering, which also requires consuming corpses in order for extra maximum energy shield for each corpse is consumed on your character. And then of course you've got Flesh Offering, which increases your attack and your cast speed for your minions. So all 3 of the offering skills require corpses. Oftentimes, one of the things that was annoying about playing Summoner, and this was true for for the 2 years that I primarily played Summoner. It was annoying to constantly have Desecrate or Unearth as an option and be like, okay, I've got to cast this over there and then in a safe area away from the boss, and then I've got to cast my Flesh Offering or my Bone Offering or my Spirit Offering, and I need to be standing near it-ish so that way like it can affect me, or conversely, if I just have it affecting so that way it, my offering affects, me as well as my minions, or if it's just affecting my minions, then that's fine. I just need to make sure that it's somewhat near my minions. Like that sort of positioning sometimes was annoying as you're playing through. And so thinking about how your zombies just are those targetable corpses now for you to do your offerings on is really, really nifty. Oh, I don't need to now cast Desecrate. I can just cast Raise Zombie, boom, offering over top of them, and then bring them all back to life. Now, there's a couple of procedural things that I'm sure some of you are already thinking about. First is the mechanical procedural problem, the potential that if you consume all of your zombies while you're popping and offering over top of them, you're going to have to cast something else, right? Because you're going to have to cast Raise Zombie in order for there to actually be minions around you who are taking advantage of that. So if you're a zombie only build and you're relying on any of these offerings or any of these skills, it kind of becomes a conundrum, right? It kind of becomes redundant. Saying, hey, I can replace Desecrate or Unearth, but then saying, yeah, but you're constantly going to be summoning zombies because you're constantly sacrificing them. It's like it's an interesting trade-off. It's an interesting trade-off. That's the way how I'll put it. Yes, you get to save a gem socket, but if you're still casting a bunch of time because you're only raising one zombie at a particular time or even two zombies at a particular time, that's kind of a bummer versus having Desecrate where you just have a bunch of corpses. So maybe Desecrate and Unearth won't necessarily go by the wayside or die off and become extinct. Maybe they won't be simply because of the way how consuming corpses will work with massive amounts of zombies. Okay, the last thing that we need to look at as we chat about this, and again, I am interested and excited for all of your feedback and all of your ideas down below in the comments. The last thing that we need to chat about, and it's been chatted about here for the last day or so as we're talking about it, is minion instability. So minions explode when reduced to low life, dealing 33% of their maximum life as fire damage to surrounding enemies. This is fantastic because all of those detonate skills that blow up your zombies and essentially sacrifice your zombies, remember how we're going to be stacking a bunch of life anyway? Like, why wouldn't you go and grab minion instability? Because if you're sacrificing them and they get consumed instantly, like you just summon a zombie and then poof, have it explode. It's a little bit more of like a miner style play where you're placing a mine and then detonating the mine. It's a little bit more of that than a trapper, where you just throw the trap and it's automatically getting activated by being near an enemy. It's a little bit more intensive on the micromanagement side as a player, where you're really only going to want to detonate your zombies at particular moments when they're within range of really exploding enemies. It could just be too slow of a gameplay style for a lot of people. So many people enjoy playing Path of Exile at a zoom pace that this entire discussion and maybe the entire archetype that is now getting changed around zombies could not even be worth it to the vast majority of the PoE community. But this is fascinating when we think about stacking minion life and the amount of life that you can get on a bunch of leveled stacked zombies. Remember that you can use bows that give several different levels to the socketed gems to empower. You can have level 28 29 zombies with tons and tons of life with extra minion life on there, and then you're using Akuna's Will. They're getting 97% increased life on top of that. There's a lot of ways to make this work, and when they're exploding, they're doing 33% of their maximum life as fire damage, along with 4% from maybe cremation, 6% from detonate dead, 3% from volatile dead. There's a lot of different ways to play around with this. This is very, very exciting. This actually could be the first league in 2 leagues, because I haven't played a summoner in Synthesis or in Betrayal. So this could be the first league in 2 leagues. I did play one back in Delve. This could be the first league in 2 leagues that I go back to playing a summoner, because this looks like it's got a lot of potential fun for it. I may just build one just to try some of this stuff out and show it off to you guys just as a fun thing. But anyway, that's our discussion for the day. The question for you guys are, how will you use Akuna's Will? Will you use Akuna's Will? Does this make you want to try out playing a summoner, playing around with the raise zombie effect that Akuna's Will gives you and the corpse effect that it essentially tags zombies with? Feel free to leave us a comment down below with your own thoughts, your own feedback, and as always, I hope that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you during Path of Exile 3.7 Legion League.
Nice patrons, yes, good patrons. They're so kind and supportive.
I can't believe you watched that thing. That was good job. You did it. You got through the whole video. Yay.